God's Wisdom for a Fair and Just World by Dr. Jim Richards. Chapter 10, Cultivating Ethnic Warfare. In Matthew chapter 24, verse 7, Jesus reveals an integral aspect of the disinformation campaign to create war, riots, and social conflicts on a global scale. The King James Version says, quote, "Nation will rise against nation." In the original language, it says, "Ethnos shall rise against ethnos." This word is referring to ethnic groups. When we first think of ethnic groups, we tend to think only of racial distinctions. However, according to the Oxford Dictionary, ethnicity is the result of breaking down the population into many different kinds of groups: national, cultural, traditional, tribal, ancestral, racial, and more. He is describing within the context of his opening warring, splintering countries into as many factions as possible. Deceit, i.e., propaganda, will then be used to magnify strife, fighting, jealousy, and hatred between the factions. This would be a good time for believers to remind themselves that hatred, contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, dissensions, heresies, or groupthink, envy, murders, drunkenness, revelries, and the like are the works of the flesh, Galatians 5:20 and 21. Any Christian supporting or agreeing with this approach has a means to solve the problems in direct opposition to God, regardless of the motive or the need. God endeavors for men to solve problems through mutual respect, unity of purpose, open, honest dialogue, and biblical justice. This is called the way of peace. The wicked who do not pursue the way of peace follow the way of chaos and destruction. The Bible speaks of those using carnal, cruel tactics when it says, "The way of peace they have not known," Romans 3:17. It is never godly to create division or to employ any of the works of the flesh to accomplish a desired outcome. When agitators stir mob violence, God's justice and the law of the land should be immediately used to stop them. Karl Marx, an avowed communist and Satanist, realized he could only seduce the world into communism with the untenable promises of socialism. In fact, it is believed that Marx saw socialism as the only lie powerful enough to destroy the entire world. So what do socialism, communism, and Satanism have to do with what is happening in the world today? Global elitists create overwhelming fear by using propaganda to blow conflicts entirely out of proportion. They create a straw man to blame for the problem and then offer a solution that requires surrendering personal freedom. There are genuine problems in America and other countries. Still, one thing you can be sure of: those controlling the media and offering solutions that violate God's justice are the ones who created and inflated the problems. The world they seek to create will only be a utopia for them. It will be hell on earth for the rest of us. In the mid-1930s, a black man, Manning Johnson, became a communist. He believed they were sincerely trying to improve conditions for his people. But like many blacks who became communist, it didn't take long to realize the wicked and corrupt agenda of communism. As he put it, quote, "They have no interest in helping the black community. They intended to use his people as cannon fodder in a bloody revolution to destroy America." As early as 1928, the communists recognized that racial issues in America would be their means of destroying our nation. Manning Johnson authored color, communism, and common sense. Anyone who wants to understand the real reason for the ethnic wars plaguing the world should read this book. You might ask, what does communism have to do with America? Communism is no longer a threat. The Cold War is over. After World War II, the Soviet Union became synonymous with communism, which was viewed by Americans as a political party. However, communism and socialism are not just political. They have religious roots in Satanism. They are working a religious agenda to eliminate the knowledge of God from the earth. Their murderous divisiveness is not the end. It is a means to the end. Ethnic wars in first world countries are caused by a little of truth mixed with a massive amount of propaganda, void of facts and inflamed by professional agitators who create the illusion of a monumental problem. Socialism is the seductive solution to an insinuated problem. In America, racism is the weak place in the wall that has been bombarded by the enemy for at least 100 years. We must remind ourselves before moving forward that communism is not a country or even a political movement. Communism is an idea that promotes a utopian society by rejecting God's morals, values, and ethics. Its promise is a paradise where you can fulfill all the lust of your flesh with no guilt. One of the incredibly effective propaganda tactics is to present socialism as if it is not communism. But, as Marx and others have pointed out, socialism is a transitional step into communism. Many agitators inflaming violence in the streets would not sacrifice their lives to such a wicked cause if they realized the outcome. For many, it took decades of brainwashing in grammar school, high school, colleges, and universities to bring them to their current misdirected zeal. They agitate and riot to usher in socialism, which they only know as a theory. They have no understanding of how it will affect them. A few years ago, I saw an enlightened undercover report. They asked students if they were in favor of socialism, and the students expounded on the goodness of socialism. Then they were asked to share their computers with other students. The moment they were asked to make any sacrifice, they emphatically refused. College students, those struggling to make a living, and yes, many Christians have been duped into believing the straw man. They do not see the wealthy as job creators. They do not realize the benevolence of the wealthy. They have created an imaginary image of a wicked people hoarding money as children starve on the streets in front of the lavish homes of the wealthy. They never realize that they may soon be labeled as the wealthy and their belongings will be appropriated. Socialism is first in the form of a delusional idealism that must be fought for at any cost. Those who turn away from God's word and surrender to the propaganda cooperate and sacrifice more and more to create the utopia that never comes. By the time they awaken from their delusion, it is too late. Since socialism never works, they must create more strawmen, i.e., people to blame for its failure. Those who hold to any moral or ethical concepts are blamed as the reason socialism isn't working. These people must be eliminated. Continual brainwashing conditions the population to surrender one freedom at a time until they are forced into communism. They are conditioned to accept the philosophies of socialism. After all, they now realize that those who do not comply are eradicated. The more governmental powers are consolidated, the more inequality, poverty, and abuse of power expand. Like all cults, the leaders never accept responsibility for their failed promises. The people's lack of commitment is always the culprit. Quote, "You just need to be more dedicated. You need to sacrifice more. Blah, blah, blah. You need to convince yourself more deeply that the lie is true." Every failed promise for which leaders refuse to accept responsibility leads to a demand for more sacrifice from the followers. This continual increase in commitment will always come down to rejecting Jesus as Lord and swearing ultimate allegiance to the state. What few will ever know is this: just as socialism is a transition into communism, communism is a transition into Satanism. Most of Karl Marx's books have never been read outside of Russia. The communists do not want the world to know how Satanism drove the creation of communism. Karl Marx was a pure Satanist. He was not like people who think Satanism is about sex, drugs, and sin. Unlike many Satanists, he has no illusion of the remotest possibility of Satan defeating God. Unlike many Christians, a true Satanist knows the battle between God and the devil is determined. It was won the moment Jesus rose from the dead. Marx wrote that he knew he would spend eternity in hell. His only joy would be the millions of people he would take with him. True Satanists know all they can do to hurt God is to hurt what he loves most, humankind. They are fully committed to compelling people by deception or torture to reject God. Do most socialists know this? No. But this is the real goal.